Did you know cancer often starts with tiny changes most seniors mistake for normal aging? That's why so many people wait too long and miss the only window to stop it before it spreads. This video uncovers the 7 cancer signs you need to catch early, especially if you're 65 or older, and you'll hear how one woman saved her life by acting fast. What happened to her could happen to you, and her story might be the wake-up call you need. Before we start, tell us where you're watching or listening from. If you find this helpful, hit the subscribe button, because tomorrow we have new special tips for you. There once was a man named Walter. He was 78 years old, had white hair like soft snow, and wore big cozy sweaters even in spring. Walter loved to sit on his front porch, drink warm tea, and listen to the birds sing. Every morning, he fed the squirrels and chuckled when they chased each other. Walter had always been strong. He used to fix cars, lift heavy tools, and never missed a day of work. But lately, something had changed. He felt more tired than usual. Not the normal kind of tired like after a long walk, but a tiredness that lived deep in his bones. At first, Walter didn't think much of it. "I'm just getting older," he whispered to himself. But then he noticed his pants were getting looser. He hadn't been eating less, and he hadn't been exercising more. Still, he was losing weight, and he didn't know why. One morning, his daughter June came to visit. She gave him a hug and looked at him closely. "Dad," she said softly, "you look thinner." Walter laughed and made a joke, but deep down, he was a little scared. The next week, Walter began feeling a strange pain in his belly. It wasn't very sharp, but it was always there like a tiny drum tapping quietly. Sometimes he felt like he needed to go to the bathroom more than usual, and sometimes he didn't go at all. But Walter didn't want to complain. He thought, old people have aches and pains. That's just part of life. So he smiled and kept feeding the squirrels, even though the pain stayed. One night, Walter woke up with sweat all over his forehead. His heart was beating fast, and he felt dizzy. June came over the next morning and found him sitting on the porch, pale and shaky. "Dad, we're going to the doctor," she said firmly. Walter didn't want to go, but he didn't argue either. The doctor was kind and asked a lot of questions. He checked Walter's weight, listened to his heart, and ordered some tests. After a few days, the doctor called and asked Walter and June to come in. The room was quiet, and the doctor's eyes were serious. "Walter," he said gently, "we found something. It's cancer." Walter felt like the world stopped turning. He didn't cry, but he held June's hand very tightly. The doctor explained that the cancer had been growing for a while. It had been silent, sneaky, hiding in the background. The tiredness, the weight loss, the belly pain, they were all small whispers from Walter's body, trying to say something was wrong. Walter blinked slowly. He thought about the months he spent brushing those signs aside. He thought about the squirrels and the porch and the tea. "Will I be okay?" he asked. The doctor sighed. "We'll do our best," he said. "But it would have been easier if we found it sooner." Walter nodded, his eyes full of worry and regret. That night, June sat beside him, her hand wrapped around his. "You didn't do anything wrong, Dad," she said softly. "You just didn't know." But Walter wished he had listened sooner. He wished he had told someone about the strange feelings in his body. He wished he hadn't been so afraid of bothering people. Over the next weeks, Walter went to many appointments. Some days were hard, and some were even harder. He lost more weight. He got tired faster, but he kept going because he had hope. He told everyone he knew, if something feels wrong in your body, don't wait. Don't be afraid. Go ask someone. It could save your life. Walter's story is not rare. Many older people ignore little signs. They think being tired or losing weight is just part of getting older. But sometimes these small changes are actually big red flags. Our bodies try to tell us when something is wrong. They whisper before they scream. And if we don't listen, we might miss our chance to fix it. Doctors say that early signs of cancer can be very gentle, almost quiet. A little pain that doesn't go away. A small lump you didn't notice before. A strange change in how your body works. These might not seem like much at first, but they can be very important. The truth is, cancer doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it tiptoes. And that's why it's so dangerous. Because when you finally hear it clearly, it might be too late. But it doesn't have to be this way. Listening to your body, even when it whispers, can make all the difference. Walter learned this lesson the hard way. He told his friends, his neighbors, even strangers at the grocery store. Don't ignore the little things, he'd say. They might be trying to save you. If you're over 65, your body might speak in quiet voices, but that doesn't mean you should ignore them. It means you should listen even harder. Because sometimes those tiny changes are the first signs that something dangerous is growing inside. And that brings us to the next part of Walter's story, what those 7 warning signs actually are, and how they can help you catch cancer before it catches you. After Walter learned he had cancer, he wanted to understand what had happened to his body. He kept thinking, why didn't I know sooner? So, he asked his doctor a very important question. What signs should I have been looking for? The doctor looked at him kindly and said, there are 7 warning signs that older people, like you, should never ignore. Walter listened carefully. He wanted to remember each one, not just for himself, but for others too. He even took out a little notebook and started writing them down. The first sign was unexplained weight loss. That's when you lose pounds without trying, no diet, no exercise, just shrinking slowly. Walter had noticed that. His clothes got baggy, and he had to tighten his belt. He thought it was normal aging, but it wasn't. The doctor said, if your pants get loose and you haven't changed how you eat or move, that's a red flag. The second sign was feeling very tired all the time. Not sleepy like when you stay up late, but tired like walking to the mailbox feels like climbing a mountain. Walter nodded. That happened too. He thought he just needed more naps, but his body was actually crying out for help. The doctor said, cancer steals energy from your body, even when you're just sitting still. The third sign was pain that won't go away. Not a stub toe or sore knee, but pain that keeps coming back or never leaves. It might be a belly ache, a sharp spot in your back, or even a weird headache. Walter remembered his belly pain. It had felt like a tiny drum tapping every day. That pain had been trying to get his attention. The fourth sign was a lump or bump you can feel under your skin. It might be on your neck, your breast, your arm, or anywhere. Some lumps are soft and some are hard, but if they're new and don't go away, they need to be checked. Walter's neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, once found a lump in her breast while taking a shower. She went to the doctor right away, and they caught her cancer early. She had surgery, and now she's fine. The fifth sign was changes when going to the bathroom. That means blood in your poop, peeing too often, or feeling like your stomach isn't empty after going. Walter had noticed that too. He kept thinking, why do I need to go again? But he didn't say anything. His doctor told him, many cancers start in places where waste leaves the body. If something changes, it's a message. The sixth sign was a sore that won't heal, like a cut on your skin or inside your mouth that just stays and never gets better. Our bodies are made to heal. When they don't, something's wrong. Walter remembered having a sore inside his cheek that stayed for weeks. He thought it was from biting his mouth while eating, but now he wondered. The seventh and final sign was a cough or a voice change that lasts too long. If you're coughing for more than a few weeks, or your voice sounds rough like sandpaper and doesn't come back to normal, it could be something more serious. Walter's old friend, Ben, used to joke that he had a frog in his throat, but that frog turned out to be throat cancer. Walter never forgot that. The doctor told Walter, these signs don't always mean cancer, but they do mean it's time to see someone who can check. Walter read through his notes again and again. He even wrote the signs in big letters and taped them to his fridge. He didn't want to forget. He also began telling everyone he knew. At church, he stood up during announcements and shared what he learned. You might think your body is just getting old, he said gently, but sometimes it's not just age. Sometimes it's something else, and you deserve to find out. People listened. They asked questions. Some even went to see their doctors the very next week. Walter became a quiet hero in his town. He wasn't a doctor or a nurse. He didn't wear a white coat or carry a stethoscope. But he had something even more powerful. He had a story, and he had the truth. He told people, don't be scared to go to the doctor. Be scared of waiting too long. He knew that early signs were like gentle knocks on the door. If you open the door quickly, you might be able to stop something bad before it grows bigger. But if you ignore the knock, you might not get another chance. Walter wanted everyone to listen for those knocks, to watch their bodies closely, to love themselves enough to speak up when something feels wrong. The 7 signs were now part of Walter's daily prayer. He didn't want anyone else to feel the regret he had felt. He knew now that one visit to the doctor could change everything. And soon, he would meet someone who proved just that. A woman who caught her cancer in time and showed Walter the power of early action and quiet hope. Her name was Margaret, but everyone called her Maggie. She was 72, with silver hair that curled like soft ribbon and eyes that sparkled like morning dew. Maggie loved her garden. She talked to her roses, named her tomatoes, and smiled at the bees as if they were old friends. Every afternoon, she would put on her big sun hat, grab her watering can, and hum a song while pulling out weeds. Life felt peaceful. She lived alone, but she didn't feel lonely. Her daughter, Lily, lived in another town but called every evening. One day, while brushing her teeth, Maggie noticed something odd. Her gums were bleeding. Not a lot, just a little red on the sink. Must have brushed too hard, she thought. But it kept happening day after day. Then she noticed a tiny sore on the inside of her cheek. It didn't hurt much, but it wasn't going away. She shrugged it off. It's probably nothing, she whispered to herself. But her gut said something different. It was like a little bird flapping inside her chest, trying to get her attention. Maggie remembered a talk she had heard at the senior center a few months earlier. A kind man named Walter had spoken about cancer and how small signs can be big warnings. He had talked about bleeding gums, sores that don't heal, and how easy it is to ignore things until it's too late. Maggie had smiled and listened politely back then. But now, his words came back like a soft echo in her heart. Don't wait, he had said. Don't be afraid to check. That night, Maggie told Lily what she had noticed. Mom, Lily said gently, please go see someone. The next morning, Maggie put on her favorite yellow sweater and made an appointment with her doctor. Her hand shook a little as she dialed the number, but she told herself that being brave doesn't mean not feeling scared. It means doing the right thing even when you are. At the clinic, the doctor took a close look at her mouth and asked a lot of questions. He said he didn't want to worry her, but it was best to get a few tests done, just to be sure. Maggie nodded, her fingers twisting together like nervous vines. A week later, the phone rang. The doctor asked her to come in. Maggie could feel her heart thumping as she sat in the waiting room, looking at the same old fish tank that always had one sleepy goldfish. The doctor said softly, it's cancer, but we caught it very early. Maggie blinked. She wasn't sure whether to cry or smile. Early, she asked. Yes, he said, because you came in when you did, we can treat it. We have a strong chance of getting rid of it completely. Maggie felt her eyes fill with tears, not from sadness, but from relief. It was as if someone had reached into the storm cloud above her and opened a patch of sunlight. She started treatment a few weeks later. It wasn't easy. She felt tired and had to rest more. Sometimes her mouth was sore and she had to eat soft foods. But she had hope, real hope. Every time she walked in a hospital, she held her head high and whispered, thank you, body, for warning me. Thank you, me, for listening. Her neighbors brought soup. Lily sent her cards and silly photos of her grandkids. Maggie kept gardening between treatments. She would hum softly to her roses and tell them stories about her brave little trip to the doctor. After a few months, the doctor gave her the best news of all. It's gone, he said, smiling. You're cancer-free. Maggie laughed, and it sounded like wind chimes dancing in the sun. That moment changed everything for Maggie. She realized how powerful one small decision could be. She had listened to her body's whispers. She hadn't ignored the warning signs. And because of that, she got to keep planting her garden, watching the bees, and feeling the earth between her fingers. She started speaking at the same senior center where Walter had once shared his story. She stood tall in front of the group and said, I'm here because I paid attention. I'm alive because I acted early. The room always grew quiet when she spoke. People listened. They felt something stir in their hearts. Some even wiped tears from their eyes. Maggie and Walter eventually met. They sat together on a park bench, both holding warm cups of tea. You saved me, Maggie said. Walter chuckled and said, no, you saved yourself. I just passed you the flashlight. They decided to write down the stories of others who caught cancer early, so they could share them in newsletters, libraries, and even at bus stops. Maggie believed that hope grows just like her garden, one seed at a time. And sometimes, all it takes is a little courage to plant that first seed. She always ended her talks by saying, if you feel something strange in your body, don't be embarrassed. Don't wait. You matter, and you deserve to know the truth early. For Maggie, the doctor's visit wasn't scary anymore. It was a doorway to more birthdays, more sun hats, and more tea on the porch. She believed that one brave step could give you many more gentle mornings. But she also knew something else that was just as important. Our bodies don't always shout, and that's why older people have to listen extra carefully. And now, let's understand why growing older can sometimes make these signs even harder to notice, and why we must pay even closer attention with every passing year. Walter and Maggie sat quietly together under a large oak tree, sipping tea and watching the wind move through the leaves. They had both faced cancer in very different ways, one too late and one just in time. But they had one thing in common. They wanted others to learn from their stories. One afternoon, Maggie asked something that had been on her mind for a while. Why do you think we didn't notice the signs right away, Walter? He thought for a moment, then nodded. Because when we get older, he said softly, our bodies change in sneaky ways. They don't always shout anymore. They whisper. That sentence stayed with Maggie like a song you can't forget. She realized that it wasn't just about missing the signs. It was about how aging makes those signs quieter, softer, and easier to ignore. When we're young, our bodies are like loud alarms. If something is wrong, we feel it right away. A cut hurts sharply. A fever makes us shiver. A bump makes us wince. But as we get older, something changes. Our skin gets thinner. Our nerves become slower. Our bones creak more, and we don't always feel pain in the same way. Maggie remembered the sore in her mouth. When she was younger, it would have hurt a lot more. But now it had just been a dull ache, almost easy to forget. And Walter had said the same about his stomach pain. It was there, yes, but it never screamed. It was more like a quiet knock on a door he didn't want to open. That's the tricky part about aging. We begin to accept discomfort as normal. We think, of course I'm tired, I'm old, or of course this hurts, I'm not young anymore. But sometimes, those things aren't normal at all. Sometimes, they're signs that something bigger is happening inside. The doctor explained it to Maggie in a way that made sense. Imagine your body is like an old house, he said. The pipes creak, the windows stick, the roof leaks just a little. You get used to it. But what if termites are eating the walls from the inside? You might not notice right away. The damage is hidden, and by the time you see it, it could be too late. Maggie nodded. So even small things matter? She asked. The doctor smiled. Yes, he said. Even small things, especially when you're older. Walter once told a group of seniors, we're not just old, we're wise. But being wise means knowing when to ask for help. Don't let pride keep you from getting checked. There's also another reason older people miss signs. Many of them grew up in times when complaining wasn't allowed. They were taught to be strong, to be quiet, to carry on no matter what. Walter used to say, back then, if you had pain, you just kept working. But now, being strong means something different. It means having the courage to say, something doesn't feel right. Maggie once told a friend, there's no trophy for suffering in silence. And she was right. Pain that is hidden can grow. Cancer that is ignored can spread. Aging doesn't make you invisible, and it doesn't mean your worries don't matter. In fact, it means your body needs more care, not less. Another tricky part of aging is that symptoms of illness can feel just like normal aging. When you feel tired, is it just because you didn't sleep well, or is something deeper going on? When your back hurts, is it just arthritis, or is it something pressing on your bones? Maggie started keeping a little notebook. Each day, she wrote down how she felt. If something new showed up, like a new pain or change in appetite, she made a note. That notebook became a tool, not just for her, but for her doctor too. This helps us see patterns, her doctor said, and patterns help us find answers. Walter began doing the same thing. He didn't love writing, but he knew it was important. He wrote down things like, woke up dizzy today, or had no appetite again. It helped him understand that his body was still speaking, just in smaller, quieter ways. They both encouraged their friends to do the same. Write it down, they said. Listen to the little things. At the senior center, they even started a health buddy group where people checked in with each other weekly to talk about how they felt. No more silence. No more brushing things off. Just open hearts and shared wisdom. Walter and Maggie knew that growing older doesn't mean giving up. It means being even more careful, even more aware. Our bodies are like old books, filled with stories, filled with wisdom, but sometimes with torn pages and worn-out covers. That doesn't make them less valuable. It means we must handle them with gentleness and respect. They believe that if every senior took one extra step, just one small visit to the doctor when something fell off, it could save lives. Maggie liked to say, we're still blooming, even in our later years. But we have to watch the soil and feel the sun. Aging might hide the pain, but love, attention, and action can bring the truth back into the light. And that's why Walter and Maggie wanted to end every talk with one final message. Because at the heart of it all, the most powerful medicine is not just pills or tests. It's believing that your life still matters and acting like it does. There was a day when Walter stood at his mirror and didn't recognize himself. His face looked thinner, and his shoulders slumped a little more than usual. He looked at his eyes and saw something he hadn't seen in a while: fear. But behind the fear was something else, something quiet but strong. It was the small flicker of a thought: I'm still here. And those words mattered more than he ever imagined. Across town, Maggie was tying a bright pink ribbon on a basket of homemade muffins. She had just come back from her final checkup, and the doctor had told her she was still cancer-free. She smiled as she walked down the street, hand-delivering muffins to the nurses who had taken care of her. You helped me stay alive, she whispered at each door. But deep in her heart, she knew something important. Yes, the doctors had helped, but she was the one who made the first brave move. She had chosen to go to the doctor. She had chosen to listen to her body. She had chosen to fight for her life. That choice had made all the difference. Walter and Maggie knew now what they hadn't known before. Being over 65 didn't mean your story was over. It didn't mean your value had faded or that your health didn't matter anymore. In fact, they believed the opposite. "We've been through so much," Walter said one day. "We've raised kids, worked hard jobs, cared for others. Why stop caring about ourselves now?" Maggie agreed. "We deserve to feel good," she added. "We deserve to know what's going on inside us. Our lives are not less important just because we're older." They started telling this to everyone they met, on buses, in grocery store lines, and even in waiting rooms. "Don't wait," Walter would say. "You matter. You're worth the trip to the doctor." Maggie would chime in, "It's not weakness to get checked. It's self-love." Many older adults had grown up putting others first. They fed their families before feeding themselves. They gave their children everything and never asked for much in return. And now, in their later years, many felt guilty spending time or money on their own health. Walter remembered how he used to say, "Oh, I don't want to bother the doctor." But after his diagnosis, he understood. Not going wasn't kindness, it was quiet neglect. Not checking the pain wasn't bravery, it was risk. Now, he told people, the greatest gift you can give your family is to take care of yourself. Maggie said the same. Your children want you around, she'd tell her friends. Your grandchildren want more hugs, more stories, more time. Please don't disappear because you waited too long. There's something powerful that happens when a person decides they are worth saving. The world changes, even just a little. The way they walk is different. The way they talk to themselves becomes gentler. Maggie started writing notes on her bathroom mirror. One said, "I am still blooming." Another said, "My life has value every day." Walter started writing letters to his grandkids, telling them stories of his youth and why he was trying harder now to stay healthy. "I want you to know your grandpa tried," he wrote. "I want to be here to see you grow." These were not just nice words. They were acts of love. Some people think that once you get old, it's too late to make a difference. Walter and Maggie knew better. They saw friends change their habits. Some stopped smoking. Some started walking every morning. Some called their doctors about strange aches and finally got answers. One woman named Joan had ignored a lump in her chest for months. But after hearing Maggie speak, she made an appointment. The lump was cancer, but it was small, and she beat it. Joan cried when she saw Maggie again. "You saved my life," she said. Maggie held her hand and said, "No, you saved your life. You decided to love yourself." The truth is, loving yourself when you're older is one of the bravest things you can do. The world often forgets older people. Ads in magazines talk about youth, smooth skin, and running marathons. But Walter and Maggie believed that wrinkles were just lines drawn by time, filled with wisdom. That slow steps were still strong ones. That gray hair didn't mean fading. It meant shining in a different way. Every day that you wake up is another chance to take care of yourself. To eat better, to rest more, to speak kindly to your body, to ask questions when something doesn't feel right. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to believe that your life still matters. Walter often told people, if you saw smoke in your house, you wouldn't wait until it became fire. You do something. Your body is your house. Don't wait. Maggie liked to say, if your car made a funny noise, you check it. Your body deserves the same care. These simple messages touched hearts. They reminded people that age is not the end. It's another chapter. And even if your hands are shaky, you can still turn the page. The doctor's office isn't something to fear. It's a place of truth. And truth, even when it's hard, is better than silence. Walter and Maggie had both been afraid, and they admitted it. But fear didn't win. Love did. And so, every time someone new said, "I'm scared to go to the doctor," Maggie smiled and said gently, "Go anyway. You're still here. You still matter. Let that be enough." Walter would nod, his voice soft but steady. You have more time to give. Don't waste it by waiting. Life, even at 70, 80, or 90, is still a life worth fighting for. There are stories left to tell, songs left to sing, hands left to hold. You may be older, but you're still the same person who laughed as a child, danced as a teen, worked hard as an adult. That person is still inside you, still full of love and light. And for the many people over 65 who wonder, what should I be looking out for? Remember, the signs of cancer are real, but so is your strength, and now you know exactly what to do. On your screen, you see two new videos that I'm sure you'll find helpful. Just decide what you want to see and click.